Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Healing Home. I'm your host, Michelle. And, today I'm very excited because I have a woman who I feel as though we've never met, but I feel that there's a bit of a kinship there, just given our interest in homemaking, fermenting, preserving food, being more self sufficient. These are all things that are really important to me. I know they're important to her. And so I'm very excited to be introducing Lanni. I know I'm going to mess it up. It's she told me Annie with an L. So Lanni of Greener Postures is here with us today. And so we're going to get into what she does and all the things that she's into. I love watching her on Instagram. She's always up to something in her kitchen, in her garden. She's just making some really brilliant things. And she is just a person that I'm really wanting to get to know better. And so before I bring her on, I just wanted to let everybody know that I dropped my full moon offering for the month today. And I'll talk about that a little bit at the end of the show. But if you wanted to find out what that is, or you want to sign up for the newsletter, you can go to my website right now and go to the newsletter tab, and you'll be able to actually read the whole issue there. And then you can learn about the offering. But we'll get into more of that at the end. But without further ado, if you please would help me welcoming Lanni of Greener Postures.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you for coming. And sorry if I said your name wrong again, even though backstage you gave me a run through of how to say it.
It's okay. It is Lanni. Yep, Lanni and Greener Postures. You had that part right. A lot of people say pastures. No, we're going for posture here.
Nice. Yes. I love it. So cool. Well, I'm so happy to have you. Thanks for spending some time with us. And yeah, if you want to just right away, we can jump in. If you want to just introduce yourself to people out there who might not know who you are, just let us know what you're up to and what you want to share and who you
Sure.
are.
Yeah, I'm Lanni with Greener Postures, and Greener Postures is just the name that my husband Chud and I gave to any of the projects we're doing that are geared toward the freedom community. So that first started with Agora markets on our property in 2021. And then that's kind of moved along to the things that I'm offering online, which include workshops on traditional ways of preserving food, like fermentation and canning and fermented beverages and bone broth and sourdough, and also a membership that I have offer now as well, all through greenerpostures.com. You can learn more there. And then I also have the Greener Postures podcast, as well as a podcast that I do with my husband called The World as It Is Today.
Awesome. Yes. I just love seeing people who are talking the talk and walking the walk. And you, my lady, are one of them. And I've noticed it right off the bat. I found you through Legs and Buffalo of False Reality Check. Shout out to those guys because they tipped me off on all your stuff and what you're doing. And as soon as I saw everything, I'm like, yes, this is awesome. We need more people doing this work and sharing it with people and just letting people know how important it really is because in our title that I have for the show today is Hearth and Home, and that is one of my favorite subjects to talk about because it is such a innate deeply rooted idea and concept that is in all of our bones and our lineages and our ancestors, because to them, like, the hearth was the center of the home, and it still is today, right? But it's kind of like it's not talked about or emphasized as much, I think in popular culture anyway. And there's actually been, since the 1960s, kind of a wave of like getting women and people out of the kitchen, out of the home, separated from the family, and that in and of itself is kind of like a breaking down of society in my opinion. It's like crumbling. And so people like yourself and other people around who are doing this work, we're like reweaving all these things together, and it's really cool to see.
I really agree that the feminist movement didn't actually do much of a favor for women, although on surface it might seem like it. But there had to be a breakdown before that for that to be allowed to happen, which came from all the modern conveniences that made life so much easier in the home. Not only like things like washing machines and other appliances, but even things like Hostess cakes and Betty Crocker and Stouffer's meals, just making it seem ladies could say it was like having a servant in their own home. There was a lot of the advertising that was geared toward women at that time, and that left them feeling kind of empty because there wasn't much to do anymore. And they were overlooking the really important work of feeding real food to your family. And the way that comes about is more than just your gathering from the grocery store. There's satisfaction to be had in doing things that take a long time and take pre-planning and take actually thought and skill. And it's unfortunate that we're here generations after that's been the typical thing in the home, and we're having to relearn all these historical ancestral wisdom that has been forgotten by modern culture. And I'm glad that I've gotten into it when I did, and that I'm as far ahead as I am. A lot of people didn't start thinking about this until 2020, which I think is one of the good parts of what has happened in this big turnaround that we've had. um, but it's true. I was sucked into the normal feminist take of things, and I was climbing the ladder at an auto body shop as an estimator and then as the production manager before I came home to be with my family full time. And I'm really glad I made that decision, and it's very satisfying.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel the same way with the feminist stuff. And I wasn't climbing the ladder at like a corporate job or anything, but I was more in the mentality of that, in my younger years, and thinking that that was kind of the way to go. And, but it slowly changed as my outlook on life changed, as information I was learning changed. And then I could see that, oh my goodness, this is totally like a kind of a psyop, like inversion sort of thing
Hmm.
going on.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
Yeah, and so good for you for being able to just, walk away from that and, make your family your focus. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to ask you, did you grow up in a situation where your parents or maybe a grandmother was canning or fermenting or anything?
I did not.
Okay.
My mom is Italian, first generation, and she's from New Jersey. So I have like the food and family as being really important. And if someone comes to your home offering them food, like the hosting part of it definitely was passed down from my mom's family. But cooking from scratch wasn't. It was more the kind of toxic diet culture that was really in the forefront with my mother. To no fault of her own, it was just how she was raised as well. Margarine being used in the house instead of butter, and following the diet fads, Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig, that kind of stuff. Slim fast drinks in the fridge and processed craft food type meals. But then there was always like, she would make eggplant parmesan, and that would be from scratch, and she would bread the eggplant. But they would be the Progresso breadcrumbs from the store. So what I even thought was scratch cooking wasn't quite scratch cooking as the way I look at it now, where I make my own sourdough bread from fermented grain that were wheat berries that I ground into flour, and then I make breadcrumbs from that. I mean, you can keep going back steps. I didn't grow the wheat berries. There's always more steps. But I think the example of the hosting part of it and always wanting to feed the people around you was really the base of who I am. It just was about 2015 when my first son had an anaphylactic response to peanuts. And I kind of dove into this realization of like, what are food allergies and why does this happen? And the doctors did not want to really offer anything about the why. They weren't really interested. It wasn't like a TV episode with the doctors like trying to investigate something. They're just like, oh, here's an EpiPen, avoid the top 8 allergens. And there you go, have a nice day. So it was me digging into all this information and realizing that most of the stuff that is in our food is not food and has not been in our food for very long. So we're currently living an experiment, being tested on with these items that you can't even call food, different additives and things like that. So that really led me to figure out what is really cooking from scratch and kind of, dumping everything in the pantry and starting over. So after helping my son heal from several of those food allergies using fermented foods, that's really what cracked everything open with like the microbiome and that whole invisible world of beautiful magic. That's just so exciting. So fermentation still today is my biggest passion and my most favorite thing to talk about and to teach. And I just had a group of people here locally, about 10 people in my house this weekend doing fermented vegetables. And it literally never gets old showing people how to make sauerkraut for the first time.
Yeah, dude, that's beautiful. Yeah, it's so funny. It's like a lot of people, their children are their introduction to a lot of this stuff because obviously it's like that's a heartstring, man. If your child is anyone you love is going through something, but when it's your child and you're seeing them suffering, it's like the first thing you want to do is to be able to figure out what can I do to stop this from happening to them, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That's a really great story. I was very curious to see how you got your start because most people who are in your and our and my boat, they weren't raised doing this stuff, you know? And I have a very similar story to you as, you know, my mom, she would make a handful of things from scratch, but I always thought it was always from scratch until I started realizing, oh, well, it was a can of cream of mushroom soup. It
Hmm.
was, you know what I mean? These
Yeah.
little things that you didn't really.
Semi homemade. Yeah.
Yes, yes, but it was always, you know, big family parties, everyone's welcome, food all around, make everybody feel at home, you know, and so that's where I had that same sort of root of that. And then it was, you know, kind of just learning research about what goes on with our food that was making me just go like, "Oh my goodness, this is
Hmm.
insane."
Yeah, that's actually really funny because about a year, 2 years ago, my mom had unearthed this small, like, recipe book that was my grandfather's and my step grandpa. So my mom's dad had passed away when she was really young. She had a stepdad, and he was a chef. He was in the military, and he cooked in the military, and then that was his passion afterwards until he died. And he did die with diabetes and bad complications of that. So he was to be doing very good in following doctor's orders, eating margarine and using aspartame and things like that. But still kept going downhill. I don't know. You know, we all do what they say, but it keeps somehow perpetuating the problem. Um, so I was excited to see his recipe book and think like, oh, he was such a good cook. And all of them were like clippings from the back of like craft food boxes and like magazines and newspapers. And all of it was like margarine and Splenda, not Splenda, what was it at the time? NutraSweet or something,
Oh,
Sweet and
yes.
Low, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
Equal, any of those kind of things. It was just so disappointing that I was like, it was like my mental like space that I had for him in my head was just like shattered. I was so disappointed. I was like, I'm not making anything with jello and fake sugar, and it's just not happening.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I know paradigm shifts happen in the least in the places you may wouldn't even have expected them to happen too.
Yeah, right.
So you say that fermentation is your favorite form
Yes.
of this. So what is your favorite like one if you could pick one or two ferments, what are the ones that you would be like, "Yep, bar none, these are my favorite ones to create."
Well, I really like to emphasize to people that fermentation it is an ancient form of food preservation. It's not just about your microbial health. It's not just about your digestion. It's not just about flavor and taste, although all those things are good. But it's the way to stretch what you grow or what you can procure for the entire year or even longer. And I love about fermentation that it continues to develop, whether you keep it in the fridge after you fermented it or you have it in a cellar. Those flavors and textures continue to develop as long as you have that. But like one that I can't go without having in my fridge is sauerkraut. And I've made it all sorts of ways. I've made it with shredded fennel bulb in it and juniper berries, and I've made it with dill and I've made it with all sorts of seed spices, but just like the straight green cabbage and salt. You massage it, jam it in a jar, and I usually go about 19, 20 days because I really like mine still crunchy. And that is something that I could like just eat it by itself. I eat it in the morning with eggs, any of that. And then I think like probably kvass is my other
Hmm.
favorite ferment, and it's really underrated, but that's hard to say because I like making fermented mustard and I make kimchi and I make fermented dilly beans and carrots and basically anything I grow in the garden I am fermenting in some way. And That's like especially cherry tomatoes are really good. I don't know if you've ever fermented cherry tomatoes. It's just a brine. You could put basil and garlic in it if you want to. But then there are like these little bombs of like sparkly champagne tomato juice inside. They're super good. But yeah, kvass is a fermented soda that's just fruit and some kind of sugar. You leave it on your counter and stir it for a few days as it develops. Once it's bubbly, you bottle it, strain it and bottle it, and leave it for another few days to build up carbonation. And then there you have basically a fruit soda that you made from scratch. And I'm also in the Northwest. I'm near Bellingham, Washington. And I have so many berries around here that just grow wild. So berry season is just all about different kinds of kvass bubbling away on the counter at all times. And it feels so good to be able to give a soda to your kid and just like not feel bad about it at all.
Yeah, nice. And kids, I've noticed, typically tend to really love fermented stuff,
Hmm.
particularly drinks. That's
Yes,
been my experience.
the drinks for sure, and then also fermented applesauce. Applesauce
Mm,
is always a winner, and you could do it with pears as well. Fermented fruit stuff can get boozy pretty quick, so you have to like watch it. But that's also why it's great because you're only fermenting at room temperature for like 12 to 48 hours, and then you're moving it to your refrigerator. And applesauce is a really good one. I always forget to mention my YouTube channel, Preserving Today, but I do have a little video of how I make my fermented applesauce on there.
yeah, that's one that I have not tried yet, and I really want to because just the sound of that, it sounds like it's freaking amazing to
It's
me.
so good. And it's no sugar or anything. It's just blended raw apples. So usually when you're having applesauce, you're having cooked apples. So this is less acidic and more fresh tasting, more of an appley flavor, and all that sparkly champagne kind of effervescence that you get with fermentation. The
Oh,
magic.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of my loves is fermentation, specifically like kombucha and the drinks I find to be really great. Have you
Mhm.
ever made a tapache?
Tapache is one of my favorites to make as well. It's really, I think of it similar as kvass because it's basically the same process. But with the tapache, you're just using the rind and core from a pineapple. So it's like even better because you are like just using the stuff you would be putting in your compost to make a
Yeah.
delicious drink and getting to eat your pineapple too. It's like literally having your cake and eating it too. Yeah. And I've made it lots of different ways using the traditional spices and different kinds of sugar. And I really just like it the plain, just the pineapple, and it's one of our favorites in the summertime.
Yeah, same here. I did it with, strawberries last year, like strawberry and the pineapple, and it was like, whoa, it was next level. Like, it was
Mm.
one of the best things I've ever created in terms of just like a fermented drink, basically,
Yeah.
I would
Yeah,
say.
it's so cool to make something that you're, like, giddy to, like, try and share and, like, excited like a child, like, there's, like, tears welling in my eyes just talking about it, I have, like, goosebumps. Just that first time I made strawberry kvass from strawberries that I grew, and it was just like, "Wow, this is, like" it's just so magical. It's, like, sweet, but not sickly sweet. It's, like, so flavorful. It has that whole essence of summer right in that bottle, and those sparkly bubbles, but not a kind that makes your stomach like feel like you have to burp. It's just this gentle effervescence, and that when you put your face close to those foods that are alive and you can feel that on your face when you breathe it in, it's just like that's how we're supposed to be eating. Our food isn't supposed to always be refrigerated or always be cooked to death. It needs to be alive, living, like bringing these colonies of microorganisms into our body to like we're coexisting with them. It's from our environment. It's all good things.
Yeah, I was just gonna bring that up of just it's to me, the fermentation, it's like a really great way to just connect with your land in
Yeah,
general because
right.
of that, because I always think about sourdough, and I know you love to make sourdough because 'cause I've
Hmm.
seen you produce these beautiful loaves. But, like, I always love the idea of, there's the San Francisco sourdough and then, whatever, that's the whole big popular thing with it, but it's because, your local yeasts are going in. So it's
Yeah,
like, not only are you repairing your own, like, gut biome with what's around you, I feel like you're repairing your atmosphere around you by doing it, by utilizing these, like, yeasts that are around naturally for us, like, they want to be used. That's I look
sure.
at yeah, they're like the same way as plants. The
Yep.
plants around you want to be in your life, and
Yeah.
so it's just so cool to know that, like, I just love thinking about the old traditional ways of making like beers and wines and meads, and how it was just probably this very natural process of how people figured this out and
Mhm.
how it's evolved now. And now you can go to, whatever your local supermarket, and there's a huge rows of kombucha and all this stuff. But nothing compares to making it at home. And you're not
It's
getting that
true.
same, like, really potent medicine that's in there.
Sure, it's the same when people try to heal their gut using a prescription or a pill form of probiotic. It's going to be, just one strain or a couple strains, all freeze dried, maybe not even still living, and from a factory where it's been sanitized and sterilized and cleaned. And it's like if you grow this at home, which, like you said, these things want to grow, you give this perfect environment for it to just thrive. You pull everything from your own environment. Don't you think that using the things within your environment would benefit you more than using something from somewhere else? So instead of getting a freeze dried starter culture from somewhere or freeze dried sourdough starter, by like just setting flour and water on your counter at room temperature, these things come to you and they grow for you. And that, when especially when starting the sourdough starter in my home, was really important to me because we live in a home that my husband's great grandfather built on a property that's been in my husband's family for over 100 years. So
Wow, that's
we
awesome.
are, yeah, thinking that I'm grabbing yeast from this environment that was used by my kid's great great grandmother to bake with in the same home, while being remodeled still. Like you can see the basement here is just, it's an old farmhouse, and to be using the same microbes that they would have is really special to me. I feel like that's not something a lot of people can say these days, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, dude, that's amazing. Wow. Whoa, that's so cool that you are having that connection and that you can see that. There's so many people too that wouldn't even be able to appreciate something like that. Oh, yeah, I got this old house and it's this and that. And
Oh,
it's just
there's
like,
so much work to do. There's so much work to be done.
yeah, it's like there's so much magic to tap into and things to learn, and just to sit and listen to what his ancestors and now your ancestors want you to do with this energy. It's like really cool.
It is.
And I love the thought of, or how you say, instead of getting, your cultures or whatever from somewhere else, finding it closer. And one of my bigger eye openers was when I started learning about yogurt, because I wanted to start making my own yogurt. And this was years ago.
Mhm.
And so I started doing research on it, whatever. And then, like, come to find out that, most yogurt companies, and you can, if you pick up a carton of yogurt and read the ingredients, which I read the ingredients of everything I buy, I can't imagine not doing that now.
I know, right?
I really can't. And I
Yeah.
watch people just take bags of like salad and like chuck it in their cart. And I literally, like, makes me shudder a little bit. Like, oh my God, you're going to eat that. You're just like throwing it in, whatever. No big whoop. And so anyway, I learned that a lot of yogurt companies just use like pectin and like stuff like that to thicken it, which, if you naturally ferment yogurt, it becomes thick. That's
Mhm.
the whole thing with it. And so then I started really paying attention to it, and I'm like looking at how many of these companies, it's like there's pectin in there, and then there's sugar, and there's no mention of even cultures at all. And so
Mhm.
I think just people have this idea of like, it says yogurt, it's yogi, that's it. It shakes, it's a little bit thick, so it must be good for me, right? And they're not really paying attention, and it's not their fault because they've never been educated, but it's just interesting to find these little things. Once you do a little bit of digging, like literally pull the topsoil off.
Mhm.
All of these things are at your disposal to learn. It's just the wanting to do it. It's the want, you
Yeah,
know?
it's I always forget to mention. People ask what was the first thing I fermented, and I say, "Well, I think I did carrot sticks and sauerkraut and cauliflower, like, all on the same day." But then I forget to mention that I did start fermenting yogurt at a job that I had. I worked at a Lebanese deli, and the family that owned it, yelled at me in Arabic, and I could never do anything right. But it was just such a great experience to still, like, force them to teach me stuff, and one of the things was to make the yogurt that we would then strain to make, a Greek style yogurt to make tzatziki, because we sold euros in the deli, and then I would also then strain that further and make lebne, which is like a really thick yogurt cheese that then sometimes if we strained for too long, we would roll into balls, and then we would preserve that in oil with herbs. And so that was my first experience, one, making fermenting anything, and then two, it was also my first experience watching somebody make something from scratch and just like go with the flow with the food. Like, let the food tell you what it wanted to be made into. Like, it's strained for too long, it's dry, and now it's going to be the balls of lebni. If it was creamy and it was thicker, then we were going to use that as the tzatziki sauce, you know. So just like if we caramelize the onions when we didn't intend to, it didn't get thrown away. It turned into a different soup instead of the one we were planning to make. We ended up making the split lentil cumin soup instead of the chicken soup. So it's like I learned a lot at that restaurant in the year or two that I was there, doing things really from scratch, falafel mix from scratch and other things. And just kind of like, yeah, reading the things or seeing what was on sale or what was in season and using that. So it was a good experience.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know it's just it's so normal for a lot of cultures to just think that way. And in America, not so much. It's a little bit more of like the takeout culture. It's the bagged salad that went bad in your fridge because you bought it but you forgot about it, but you could just go buy another one. You know, it's not about the whole like how can I turn lemons into lemonade, which is kind of like what you were just describing, right? You
Yeah,
know.
right. Yeah, if things get too soft or they start to, turn, it doesn't mean that they're garbage. They're at least compost, but they could probably be made into, cooked down into something. Your berries are too soft, they become jam or jelly. It's not lost. Yeah, at least compost or chicken food around here, but depending on what time I have. But yeah, I think that learning to work with that kind of brings you appreciation to like the cycles of life and the changes of seasons and like what you have to offer around you, and like learning to garden has really helped with that as well, obviously, and then growing my own food and figuring out how to preserve that. So you work in these like rhythms of like these big pushes of activity and effort, and then if you do that right, you're reaping the benefits of that work for the entire year. So people are like, "Oh, I don't know how you do it. You do so much." I'm like, "I do," but then I still have a lot of downtime. I still watch crap TV. Like I'm a normal person, you know. It's just that I have these pushes and I can see when it's time and we just move through it. If the apples are ripe, we're working through apples. Same with pears, berry season, all the things as they come up that are already here for us. Like we had an orchard already on the homestead when we moved in. So we have apples, we have walnut trees, and we have a pear tree that's taller than the barn that was planted by my husband's great 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 grandpa. So my kid's great 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 grandpa planted this pear
Wow.
tree. So I'm preserving these pears like as much as I can so that we have canned pears and pear butter and like pear pie filling and just dehydrated pears, and are making sure that my 2-year-old that was the first fruit he was going to taste was from that tree, whether or not he started eating fruit when it was ripe or whether it was going to be something that I preserved, and that was pretty cool.
Oh, that's so cool. And so you've brought up your kids a couple of times, and do you have 2? Is that correct?
Yeah, I have 2 boys.
Okay, and so how have you seen the way that you're doing all this stuff improve their lives? How do you see that? How do you see the excitement in them when you open up a jar of, say, pear butter? You know, what's the difference between do you have memories of giving them stuff that's more conventional from the store versus then being like, "Mom I made this. Like, let's eat it together."
Yeah.
What is the difference that you've seen?
So my oldest son is 9, and he's the one who had the food allergies when he was 18 months. So I went through this transformation and this new understanding of food after his time of beginning to eat. And my second son is only 2. So I found out I was pregnant in March of 2020 for him. So I was well on this journey. We were already living on this homestead. We already had chickens and all of that. So seeing the difference about the way my 2-year-old appreciates food at his age versus the way my 9-year-old does, is it's the importance of starting them young. My 2-year-old loves sauerkraut. My 9-year-old is on the fence about it still. There's other ferments I can get him to eat, but my 2-year-old is just, he eats oysters with me. He's having beef liver, like raw egg yolks. None of this stuff grosses him out because it's just normal food. But really what I do notice about like my 9-year-old and the changes is like watching me do stuff in the kitchen. He can act like it's boring and I know I don't want to help, but then sometimes I do a homeschool class on Fridays where I have other kids come and they learn kitchen skills from me here in my home. And when that happens, he comes over and he starts telling them all these things that you have to do, you know, how sourdough works or whatever. And I'm like, see, it doesn't matter if he acts like he likes it, doesn't matter if he's by my side working with me. He's taking all this in. He's seeing how this happens and seeing how proud he is to share, you know, how he helps with the chickens or collecting eggs, and explaining that to his peers. It makes me really realize that it's super beneficial because, you know, that age 9-year-olds can kind of seem like underwhelmed by some of the more boring stuff that parents do. But anytime you pull out a soda, that changes. So the fermented soda is a good way to go. Herbal root beer, ginger beer, kombucha, whatever it is, it's like he's into it.
Oh, that's so awesome. I love that. And I love that I've seen that with herbs too in kids, how they just like light up and they are just so excited by it and they want to learn more. And, you know, I feel like it's so important to, like you said, start them young because any little thing that you absorb while you're young, you like carry that on for the rest of your life. So it's really cool that you have the contrast though of both boys to be able to see the differences. Um,
Yeah.
and so when you kind of like, I might maybe we can shift gears a little bit into this subject because I know that you like you're like a not a promoter of, but you are interested in like the Weston A. Price diet systems and all of that. And I too value those teachings and have learned a lot from his books and or the books that have been written about his, you know, diets
Mhm.
and stuff. And so when you were pregnant with your first child, were you already incorporating this type of food?
No.
Okay. And so I would love to hear if you're willing to share if
Yeah.
you can notice the differences between your pregnancies, because I have a friend who I have a reference to because I watched her transition between following the Weston A. Price diet very strictly for one of her pregnancies and then not the second one and then seeing the differences. So I'd love to hear your experience with that.
Yeah. So my first pregnancy was in 2013. And I was still from like that diet culture. I had been, you know, vegan, I'd done Weight Watchers, I'd done everything, but it was always about restricting things and like low calorie as what all you were worried about is if you were getting fat or not. There wasn't anything about nourishment. There wasn't anything about understanding how feeding yourself affects all these other symptoms that they say the symptoms are side effects of being overweight, but it's not. It's the side effect of the diet, as I know now. So I ate very little actually early in pregnancy because everything grossed me out. And it was a lot of like carbs. And when I say carbs, it's just stuff from the store, which I realize now is like enriched flours with added like synthetic vitamins and things that I don't want at all anymore. Um, I didn't have a difficult pregnancy, but I did have high blood pressure through my entire pregnancy. They called it high risk because I was overweight and I had high blood pressure. They put me on blood pressure medicine. I took it and I just, you know, went along my business. And I didn't think that I could have a home birth or an alternative birth for that first one because of my weight and because they told me that you know, I was high risk because of high blood pressure. So I'd planned a natural birth in the hospital, but me being stubborn and liking to do things myself, I didn't want a doula and I didn't want a home, a midwife. I had a primary care doctor that had been my doctor since I was born, and she was going to help me through it. It was just before she was retiring, and I trusted her. And my birth was good up until the end. They were kind of like, you know, you're just taking too long. Let's just move this along with a little pitocin. So I was like, okay, and that was like, whoa. But I still managed to bear through that without any pain medication, and my son was born, and it was beautiful. But they also gave me antibiotics during that time because of a test that you have to take when you're pregnant to see if you have a certain kind of bacteria, and they say that it can give your kid meningitis. Um, at least 50% of women have this bacteria. It's naturally present on the body. It's group B strep. It's totally normal. It doesn't mean you have an infection. And so knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have done that. And I really feel like that hospital birth and that antibiotics, so he wasn't able to take my microbiome, is what led to him having allergies early on. And so I was really focused on that not being a repeat when I found myself pregnant in 2020. And because we already had our eyes open, we knew what was happening. And March 13th was the day that Donald Trump declared a national state of emergency. And that was the day I found out I was pregnant. And I said, like, I know what's going on. I've already been studying Event 201. Like, I think I know what they're doing. Let's see how far they go with it. But right now, we need to start planning how to not have this baby in the hospital. I'm not going to the doctor, and I'm not going to the hospital. So I called a home birth midwife, and they were saying they were being cautious because of the virus, and that they were only doing it at a birth center birth. So I was like gonna go to the birth center, and that was fine. And I got hooked up with her. And it was maybe before then that I became familiar with Weston A. Price, which, for those who don't know, he was a dentist that was active in like the 30s. And he went and studied a whole bunch of different indigenous tribes and took notes on their diets, and the members that were still eating the ancestral diets and their health versus the ones who are eating a more Western diet and their health. Differences like the facial structure and the dental arches and sinuses, and just like the farther down you were eating the Western diet, the more it was affecting the offspring of the people. Really interesting stuff. So ancestral diets is different depending on where you are. So it's just like, if you're eating fruits and vegetables that are local and in season, you're good. But then things like properly preparing harder to digest things like grains and beans and nuts, and eating the whole animal like bone broth and organ meats and things like that are really important. So for my second pregnancy, I did follow the Weston A. Price diet, as well as like this Lily Nichols. She's a registered dietitian that specializes in maternity stuff. And she has a book called Real Food for Pregnancy, and also one called Real Food for Gestational Diabetes. And I decided I would just eat as if I was going to have gestational diabetes, because I was so worried that there would be anything that would force me to decide if I wanted to have a free birth with no help or go to the hospital because my midwife wouldn't help me. So I really wanted to make sure that I didn't gain much weight and that I was maintaining my blood sugar. And I took that into my own hand by testing my own blood sugar at home and seeing how different foods affected me, and ate really real whole foods. So that means I was eating raw beef liver, and I was eating egg yolks and raw egg yolks and lots of bone broth, and cooking extra of all this stuff and freezing it or canning it so that I had that for myself postpartum as well. And this, I was able to successfully have a home birth in this house that's been in the family for over 100 years. And it was just me and my husband until about 15 minutes before the baby was there. The midwife arrived and helped us change the sheets on the bed and start a load of laundry, and left. And it was blissful. It was amazing, spiritual, like for both my husband and I. And it was 100% amazing. Like my first pregnancy and labor, I enjoyed as well, but this was like, yeah, just transcendental. It was insane. So I definitely recommend for anyone who's pregnant or wanting to become pregnant, or anyone who wants to try to be healthier just through a natural diet, looking into the Weston A. Price Foundation.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. That's awesome. Gosh, what a cool experience to have your home birth like that, and to be able to do it so independently. I love that. I really do, because I feel like there's a weird, I don't see, I've never had children, so I try to tread lightly on some of these subjects, but I have so much interest in it. And I only have experience helping a friend of mine, during 2 of her births, but just witnessing it and then seeing how the attitude, the teachings of the midwife and the doula matter so much, because you are asking this person to help you with such a sacred act that if you don't align with something that they are doing, and you might not know that until you're literally in a tub, like about to bring a baby into the world, you're going to be a rock in a hard place. And so I feel like the fact that you guys were able to do that the way you did, wow, kudos. That is seriously so cool. And, when you, was your son present for the birth of your second boy?
So he had the option to be, and he kind of went back and forth. And that day, I wasn't positive I was in labor, but I was pretty sure he decided to go to his grandma's for a sleepover. I think he regretted it afterwards, but he did come over the next morning. It was pretty special having him see this little tiny baby that was there and just light up. It was pretty amazing. But he did say, like, if he had to do it over, he would have liked to be here.
Yeah, that's cool. And so as far as homeschooling is going, how is that how's that been working out for you guys? And if you have any like things that stand out to you that have been working or you're wanting to implement, or any
Sure.
tips?
So our son was going into kindergarten, and the 2019 was his kindergarten year, and we had already decided to homeschool before lockdown stuff would have changed our mind to that way anyway. So we were really fortunate of that. He had gone to a preschool like daycare before that, since we were both working full time, and we weren't really liking what we were seeing. As it was getting closer to kindergarten, they were starting to do kindergarten prep, what they call, which is just sit in your chair, fold your hands, stand in line, that kind of stuff. And it wasn't good for him. He's a real free spirit. He's a lot like I was when I was a kid. So he's really sassy and likes to talk and likes people to pay attention to him. And it was just not working out in that environment. So we took him out. And I'm really fortunate to have heard of the concept of unschooling before that. If for those who haven't, that's just basically like child-led learning. So instead of having a curriculum or table work specifically, you just kind of figure out what's the kid interested in that moment, just follow that interest with them. And all the things that you need to teach them or that they would need to learn will naturally happen along that path of exploring their passions. So there is a really great podcast for people who are getting into this. It's called Exploring Unschooling. And I think this woman has I think her name is Pam. She's got a community online as well that you can go with. But they talk about the concept of deschooling before you get started with homeschooling. And that was not what I tried to do first. I tried to appease like people like my parents and people who were doubtful of us by like getting workbooks and trying to make him trace letters and things like that he hated, and we kind of struggled for a while. So then I realized the deschooling part of it was really important, and we just stopped doing everything. And instead, if he was into playing the Zelda game on the Nintendo Switch, I was sitting next to him and asking him questions. And what kind of plant is that you just collected, and what kind of rock is that, and is that a real thing or is that pretend in here? And what's the hero's journey and that story? And then we would do projects outside and we would talk through them and just try to follow his interests. And then all of a sudden you realize your kid is cool and you're like getting to actually know them as a person. And it's not this chore to like force them to learn the ABCs. All of it comes naturally. So eventually we got him enrolled this last year into a learning center in town that is, it's just a homeschool supplement. So he's still considered homeschooled. And it's with a group of people that got a private membership association so that there won't be any mandate issues if something would pop up again. So that he's able to be with more kids and make friends and go there. They do stuff like whittling. So he's using a knife in a group with other kids and learning that responsibility, and, theater and like sign language and stuff like that. That's been really great too. But all of that wouldn't have gone well if we didn't get to the point where he wasn't so resistant to learning, because I think he really was, because of his experience in preschool and sitting down and being quiet. So I'm glad I learned all of that I did with him so that we could just get going on the right foot with the 2-year-old and hopefully won't have to fight through that, resistance and like kind of relearn things.
Totally. I know it's that I have the memories of being in a kindergarten class and like the anxiety that for me it would bring, because I used to
Yeah.
have separation anxiety, as a child, and just the anxiety of like being dropped off, and then the nervousness that just comes. And then anyone who knows what it feels like to be anxious, it like kind of paralyzes you. And then you go into a classroom and then you're just being told what to do. And so we're
Yes.
literally creating these little herd mentality soldiers,
Yeah.
in this system. And it's unfortunate. And it's just such, to me, it's so nice to hear your stories, because sometimes, looking into this more alternative information and stuff, it can be heavy, and you can think about, oh my God, so many things are messed up, and these children and these adults and these this and these that's, and it can be discouraging. But it's like you have to kind of rise above it, and you have to be able to take personal responsibility. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that's missing in a lot of people's lives. And when I think of school and being sent off to school, it's like, well, it's probably because your parents were working, they didn't have anybody that could watch you, so they're just going to hand you over to the state, and then it becomes the state's
Right.
issue or
Yeah.
problem, or there's a fight, or whatever it is.
So of course you would have a separation anxiety. You're being dropped off by someone who loves you to a person you barely know in a group where they're overwhelmed with too many kids, and they're coming from all different backgrounds and ways of doing things. And it's just to imagine doing that with my kid, it's shocking. So like the preschool we went to, I carefully picked it out. We spent a ridiculous amount of our income on that school because we wanted this specific one and the style of teaching that they did. And as a daycare, it was really great because it was a lot of free play. They spent tons of time outside. They had a wooded area. They're identifying plants, like all the boxes checked. But then when it came to that pre-K stuff, they were trying to prepare him for what he was going to get into. And I realized I don't want him to get into that. So I need to either shut off a part of my brain that
Mm.
lets me see how horrible this is, or we need to do something about it. It was actually my husband that said it that way. We either need to decide we're not going to think about this, or we need to homeschool our kid, because sending them off to go to state school is not, I mean, you're just, yeah, factory workers, zombies, pencil pushers. That's what you're asking for. Somebody not to learn, but to memorize what they're being told. And that's a huge difference. So watching my kid basically teach himself to read is one of the best things that I've ever experienced, because he just will not let me try to teach him to read. So now he's like, every morning we have this page a day calendar for Garfield, and he reads the Garfield comic strip to me in the morning. I help him with a word if he can't figure it out, but it's just like really nonchalant. And he's just like, he's learning to read, and it's just happening. And maybe it's a little later than it would have been if he was in public school and they were forcing it on him. But did they really know how to read, or did they memorize certain words when they're that age?
Exactly. Wow, that is so cool. I've never heard anybody say that, just like allowing them to naturally learn these things. It's like, wow, what a concept.
Yeah.
And going on this tangent, I'm so glad we switched gears to this, because I picked out a few quotes from the Nourishing Traditions book of baby and child care,
It's a great
because
one.
it is great. And I don't agree with everything in that book, but it's like there are so many gems, not only if you are raising children or if you're not, but it's just like I learned so much from reading that book. And so he has a quote. It's actually from Rudolf Steiner on homeschooling. And so the modern tendency to force intellectual learning on young children and to structure their lives with classes, lessons, and team sports deprives children of the vital development and cures from unstructured imaginative play, and can have serious consequences on the child's emotional and intellectual development. We do children no service by forcing them into these activities before the 7th year of their lives. So think of that. It's just like it like proves exactly what you said and what we're talking about. And so to think about they're being forced before they're 7 years old, if they're being forced before they're 7, it's actually not even a natural thing. But
Not at all.
if you're allowing it to just happen, and they happen to have an interest in this or that, and then you nourish it, that is when they're really going to actually inform who they are. Because one of the things I notice all the time, and I talk to Mario, my boyfriend, about all the time, is just the lack of emotional intelligence and the lack of the ability to form emotional intelligence. And it's my opinion, because of things like public schools, like the forced memorization of things, that takes people away from developing their own sense of self, which,
Mhm.
as we all grow older, and then you get to the point where you ask these big questions of like, yeah, who am I? What am I? What am I doing? What's my purpose? We're not really we're not guided to ask those questions. And then when you get to that point, then you don't even have like the resources to answer the own question from your own self.
Yeah, imagine if you would have been given a chance to discover that when you were a child and have that just always be a part of your growth. Like that's crazy to think about, because we tell kids to shut off their personality and don't talk back and be quiet and sit still at a really young age. And it's true. Steiner was involved with the Waldorf school, and that model is really interesting because it is a lot of free sensory play and learning in that way. Unfortunately, it's gone off the rails, and they were masking kids through the pandemic and everything else. So forget that. But the
Yeah.
foundation of that is really important. And that with any animal you see, like think of like puppies or kittens, and you watch them playing, and that kitten thinks it's going to murder that butterfly and it's trying to get its food, but it's just this cute little activity it's doing. And that is it practicing to be a real cat and catch it's a mouse, you know. My kids are doing the same thing when they're walking around practicing things. They're playing, they're imagining and climbing trees and doing anything else. You know, my 2-year-old today was helping me fill dirt into the little cells of a seedling tray because we're starting seeds in the window inside, and it was horribly messy. So it's really like I feel like a lot of parents want to stop that right away and clean it up because it's annoying and I'm going to have to do more work now. This would be faster if I did it myself. But for me to just take a deep breath and say, right now, I'm not starting the seedling tray. I'm helping my child do something so that he feels like he's a part of it. He can see how this goes. So I just like, you know, half an hour of him making a mess with dirt and scooping it back into the seedling tray. And then he has that memory of understanding that we put dirt in the tray and then the seed goes in and then the water, you know, and we do that again next year and the year after that. And these things that I was not exposed to at all, that I had to learn from scratch, are going to just be this like part of his understanding of the world. And I think that the more we can take a step back from our busy lives and give our kids the time that they need to do things on their own terms and just help them clean the messes up that they make, I think that we'll have better people.
Yes, definitely. I like 100% agree. And now seeing that you're doing this and all these things, oh my gosh, your children, I already see them like excelling. I don't even know them, but just hearing you tell me these stories and feeling your essence, and then, just imagining what it would feel like as a child to have that opportunity to have parents like yourselves who are doing this. It's like exciting to even think about it. It's like being excited for someone else. It's not always about what you did. It's like sometimes it's just awesome and beautiful to be excited for somebody else because they're getting an opportunity. And I think that that's something too that in society is not looked at as much. It's more of a me kind of, and there's social media and all this stuff, so it is a little bit.
Competitive, yeah.
Yeah, it's very competitive. And instead of always looking at it like, oh, well, they made the same thing as I did, well, I can do it better. It's like it shouldn't be that way. And when you're in that mindset, all sorts of weird things start to happen and pop up. And then there's like projection and jealousy and all these things that like perpetuate these deep wounds that we all have, because
Mhm.
everyone knows what it feels like to be like left out, or to be, whatever, told that you were stupid or you did it wrong, or, whatever. And obviously there are times when you would need to step in and be like, well, yeah, we don't do that because that's unsafe, or, whatever. It's not
Yes.
like, yes, we all run amok and we let them do
Not
whatever
just a
they want.
free for all. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because it's all about structure. And I'm a big proponent of having structure in your life, and building structure and making sure there's a strong foundation, because if you don't have a strong foundation, the whole building, it has a
Mhm.
tendency to just fall over at some point when you least expect it.
Yeah.
And so you're just teaching them these valuable lessons. So bravo.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I love, having kids is really fun, and it makes me do a lot of work on myself that I might not see, without it. I put a lot of thought into the word teaching, and I find I dislike it quite a bit. I did struggle in school, not because I wasn't smart enough, but because I was very, I wasn't into just blindly trusting authorities. That's something inherently built into me as a person from the time that I was born. Distrusting them, thinking they were lying to me, not understanding why. I think what I didn't realize is a lot of my teachers believed the lie and they didn't know that they were perpetuating it. But I'm now finding myself hosting these workshops and giving information to people and helping people learn to do the things that they want to do. And I really try to refrain from using the word teach or teacher or educate, because I feel in my being that is just like this negative thing where I'm like forcing something on someone. And I really believe that learning can never happen by force. Learning only happens when you want to. So it's them that are responsible to take that in, right? So I try to say that I'm like, I hope that I can be like the doula of homemaking, where I just go in and I kind of like share with you what I know, and then it's your job to decide how you take that in or handle it, and that I'm never taking responsibility for your successes because I didn't teach it to you. You learned it, if you could see the difference there.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's a really great way of looking at it because wow, man, we have so much crossover. It's crazy. Cuz hearing how you were in school and stuff, it was the same way with me and it was just like, "Oh my god, what are we doing? Like what is this? Why?" And then whatever, looking for shortcuts because it's so just like this doesn't feel right.
Right.
Okay, but that's what the authorities telling me to do, you know? And so it's very strange, but to kind of go on to your if you want to go through what could somebody expect if they were to sign up for your membership and all and kind of follow you as a homemaker.
Oh, sure. So you can follow me at Greener Postures on Instagram or Twitter, and you can listen to the Greener Postures podcast. And that's all free. And I'm kind of going with themes for months. So March is all things sourdough. Last month, February, was all things canning. And January was nourishing food. So all the podcast episodes were about Weston A. Price. So if you're interested in that topic, you can go back and listen to the January episodes of the Greener Postures podcast. Canning, you can listen to February. And then sourdough has just begun. So at the end of the month, I'll have a workshop. That's a live workshop that anybody can take and sign up for. It's just $40 and it's a 2-hour Zoom workshop where you're actually in the kitchen with me. And you also get a book that I've written about whatever the topic is. So that'll be a PDF book and access to an exclusive Telegram channel, which is, I think, probably the best part about it, because then you get to connect with the people who you might have met who also took the workshop. And then you can keep in touch with other people who are like-minded and working towards similar goals. So they're, doing sourdough or canning or fermentation, and they're posting their successes and asking questions. Or if there's a mistake made or something an outcome that they weren't expecting, we're all exploring it together, and that's really valuable. So that's how you can get in touch if you want to. But then if you're really into it, the membership, there's different tiers of that, and you can go to patreon.com/greener postures or more information at greenerpostures.com/membership. And I'm putting out like a recipe card every month and a video tutorial that's more in depth than my YouTube stuff every month specifically for the membership, as well as occasionally we have Zoom calls where the members are welcome to come and join me. We discuss something and that goes out as an episode on the podcast. So a few different ways to support what I'm doing and to get more involved. But I really think the most fun thing that we do are these live workshops. I was doing them in my house first. I think I've translated them pretty well to be able to get people involved online. It's just really an open conversation that I'm guiding people through and showing you what I'm doing in the kitchen as well. So March 26th will be the next one, and that'll be at 3 p.m. Pacific time, and that's going to be getting started with sourdough.
Dude, cool. This is awesome. Yeah, your website and everything is beautiful. And I've been listening to your shows and stuff. And I'm so excited to see. I want to learn more from you because there's so much stuff that I have like a very pretty good base of a few like handful of ferments and stuff that I do. But like I personally have only done like a very small amount of canning. And so like canning is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about because I know that there's people that say, if you can stuff, you're like taking away all the nutrients of the food and whatever, and I'm like, I don't know if that's even possible, number one. And then number two, it's just like, correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, when you're canning something, you're basically cooking it, correct?
Yeah, it's cooking inside of the jar at a very high heat.
Right.
Either in water bath boiling, that's 212 degrees boiling, or in a pressure canner, that's 240 degrees at 10 psi. And so that's to kill any of the microorganisms that could turn into foodborne illness that would make you sick as it sat on your shelf. So it's to make it shelf stable. You're basically sterilizing the food in the jar. So with any type of food preservation, there is some nutrient loss. Almost any except fermentation, I don't know, it increases some nutrients, which is really fascinating. I don't know if you knew this, but like sauerkraut, a cup of raw green cabbage has about 70 milligrams of vitamin C in it, and a cup of raw, real fermented sauerkraut has 700 milligrams of vitamin C. So there's
Whoa.
something about that bacterial process where these microbes like actually build parts of those nutrients. So that increases the nutrient vitamin C. So if you don't want to get scurvy through wintertime, you can drink your pine needle tea or you can make your sauerkraut. But I think with canning, if you compare raw carrots fresh picked from the garden to canned carrots, you're going to see a large amount of nutrient loss. But if you compare cooked carrots to canned carrots, there's not that much of a difference. So think of it, we're already cooking a lot of our foods. So think trying to have some fermented food preserved as well as having canned food preserved. And then you're having like this wider array of, living food and more maybe the minerals are going to still be there. They're not heat sensitive. There's still going to be calories and fat in the food that you've canned. Whatever was there initially, there's just maybe some of those things like vitamin C and that are a little more heat sensitive that will be cooked out. And that's why eating some things raw is also good.
Yeah, totally. Having a combination, because when I've heard people say like, "Oh, I don't like canning because it takes all the nutrients out," I'm like, dude, if you're cooking food, it's kind of like the same thing. And
Yeah.
there's over the years, I've been very interested in learning like, the difference between like a raw, like there's like debates that you can find like raw food versus cooked food and, whatever. And to me, it does seem as though, yes, there's nutrients in raw vegetables that you might cook out or whatever, but I feel, and just from my own personal experience, that actually cooked food is better depending on what it is. Like there's
Mhm.
certain things that you want to cook, or just like you said in the beginning of like, it's about how are you preparing your grains? Are you soaking your beans? Are you soaking your rice? It makes a really big difference when you do these little things. And so I think variety is, as they say, the spice of life. And I
Mhm.
think it goes along with the same kind of thing. From variety, you're going to get all the nutrients that you need instead of being so linear about how your diet is.
And if you're more in touch with nature and more in touch with the cycle of things and the way food makes you feel, then you can answer the question of what's best for you, cooked or raw. And really, if you're going to compare a raw carrot to a cooked carrot and see what nutrients is in it, it's not telling you anything about how your system is going to digest and absorb that. So what are you actually using and what are you just passing through? What is causing, intestinal distress is not going to be beneficial to you. So thinking about it like that, and I think like for me in the wintertime, cooked root vegetables are really an important part of my diet, and slow cooked meats that have the bone in it and connective tissue and fat. All of that's really important. But in the summertime, yeah, sure, salads sound good. What's growing naturally sounds good. And like in Ayurveda, they talk a lot about the heating and cooling, like with herbalism as well, right?
Mhm.
Different properties these plants have, and just thinking about how that helps you keep in balance depending on what the season is and what season of life you are in and what your body is feeling like, right?
Yeah, totally. Oh, definitely. And that we all have different body types,
Hmm.
and just like we're saying, there's not that's why, I love talking about diet, but it can be very controversial for a lot of people. You can trigger people like mad.
Yes, it's like
Just
it's like religion oftentimes. Yeah.
It totally is, and it's like, I always just try and keep in mind that everybody's different and everybody has a different way that they process food, and who knows what their history is. Did they maybe have a surgery at some point that might hinder their digestion? Do they you know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
all sorts of factors that need to play in, so it's like thinking that one diet suits everybody, just like one cowpoke suits everybody, one way of looking at your health suits everybody. It's like asinine to even think that that's
Right.
possible.
And I think that's why the work of Weston A. Price was really resonated with me, because it wasn't ever about one diet being correct for all these different tribes and all these different places. They were using what was local to them. Some places ate more fish, some people ate milk and eggs, but not much meat. And all of these people were healthy because they were eating real food that was properly prepared. And so when you find that, then you can find whatever you decide is your perfect diet for you, your constitution, whatever your DNA or wherever your family lineage is from or where you live now. All of those things are important. And I think we have been trained to not listen to ourselves and not listen to our body, and instead listen to the 5 o'clock news tell us if the egg yolks have cholesterol that's bad for us today or not, because they change their mind about that every couple of years. Um, it's never been about if you're satiated or if you feel nourished. It's been about if you have lost enough weight, if you look nice, if you fit into this dress size, or if you can do the sports you want to do. Uh, if we stop and we listen to our bodies and we think about the food we're taking in, and we are more present with it in preparation as well, I think preparing food slowly also makes your body want to accept it differently than when you go and pick up something from the store that's already prepared. It's like that salivating that you have start to happen when you're cooking something and you're smelling and it's good. That's all digestive enzymes. It starts in your mouth, and it's just part of that whole nourishing your body. It comes from, that slow kind of cooking, that type of preparation. It's some thoughtfulness, and it doesn't have to be complicated and hard. It can be as simple as just remembering to start soaking your rice in the morning before you head to work, so that when you throw it in the cooker that night after you rinse it, it's just a little bit more digestible.
Yes, totally. I love that, thinking about just the slow cooking. It's like all this type of lifestyle is a huge lesson in patience. And I think that it's such a vital lesson that is very necessary to a good life. And I know for me, like when we started buying, our own beef from a farm,
Mhm.
raised correctly, 100% grass fed and finished, and then you have a freezer full of beef, it was like it was such a great learning lesson for me, because on multiple levels. Not only was it like, I remember cooking the meat for the first time and having steaks, and both of us looking at each other and being like, "Oh my god, we've never actually had real beef." Like,
Right. Yeah.
never. This and just the amount, just the nourishment that you felt like while eating it, after eating it. And I've always had a weird texture thing with like grizzle from particularly meat beef.
Mhm.
And I think it's just like even traumatization of like being a kid and like being forced to eat like the grizzle and like, just eat
Yeah.
eat everything, because you don't leave, you can't leave the table
Yeah.
if you've eaten or whatever. You haven't eaten, and then just having that trauma connected to it, I think. But I found that I could eat the grizzle on the steaks that we were getting from the farm.
And
And
the flavor is so good. It's like next level. Yes.
it is next level. And then speaking of like the patience that came from it, it was like, okay, well, you have to like, if you have a cross-cut rib roast, you're taking that thing out like 3 days before you're
Yeah.
gonna take it, before you're gonna cook it,
Mhm.
because you have to defrost it and all that stuff. And these are just little things that you don't really think about in the fast food, pick up a sandwich culture. And I think that there's so much to be said about this slow process, and then thinking about, supporting these local farms and places that are producing really healthy meats that have been raised correctly with care and love. And you can feel it and you can see it, and you can just, everything about it is different. And so, kind of trying to bring into the fold the fact that you guys raise your own chickens.
Mhm.
And what are some of the learning lessons that you guys have learned doing that?
Sure. Yeah. I like to think of the patience part as being delayed gratification, right? Really
Ah.
enjoying that, knowing something really positive is coming and being excited to wait for it. For instance, not that I'm counting, just kidding, I'm counting. Tomorrow is 60 days since I started a wheel of cheese, and I'm going to get to taste it to see how it's good. It's been aging
Woo!
for 60 days. And I'm so excited. I've told people about it. I take it out and I look at it again and again. And I'm so, so excited to try this type of cheese I've never made before. So I'm really excited. But yeah, we have a freezer full of beef from a local grass-fed farm as well. And one thing to point out with that is that you can get stuff with that animal that you don't normally get in the store. So it's not just the same cuts of beef that you always get. It's not questionable ground beef that has other stuff that you don't really want ground into it, but you also get the tongue, and you can get the liver, and you can get kidneys, and you can get the fat, and you can render your fat, and you can have tallow, and you can make tallow balm for your skin, and soaps and chapsticks. So I've gotten really into that. For our chickens, we do have laying hens, and we also do meat birds. We also hatch our own chicks, so then we'll process our extra roosters that we don't need and eat them. They're really good for stewing and for bone broth, especially roosters make excellent bone broth. I think they must have more collagen because the gelatin in this bone broth is excellent. And then we feed our dog real food as well. So the rooster meat that might be too stringy or older birds that we cull will go to the dog, and she's very healthy and happy as well. Chickens are an excellent source of protein if you're just doing eggs. You don't have to do meat if you don't want to. You don't have to keep a rooster if you don't want them to be noisy. You can keep them in there's a huge level of variance of how you can take care of them and have this be acceptable. So you can be in a tiny postage stamp yard, or you can be, on a giant farm. We've got 26 acres for them to roam around. They only use probably about 5 of it. They don't like to go too far, but they do a great job cleaning up the garden. And a lot of people are worried about what they're feeding the chickens these days. There's a lot of information online after the egg shortage and everything. I did an episode with Monica Perez on her show Deep Dives, or the Propaganda Report, where we talked about the egg shortage, and we kind of got into chicken feed. And that's got me back into thinking about it. The majority of our chicken feed is what the chickens forage. So we just make sure we get breeds that are strong foragers, and they eat, they're omnivores. They eat insects, they eat slugs, they eat snails, they eat rodents. They'll eat whatever meat they can find, kitchen scraps, milk. They also eat, dandelion greens and all the little shoots that are coming up. So we have an area with raspberries and brambles, and it got really overgrown over the winter, and we just opened the fence for them. So they're cleaning all of that out for us, mulching it. Their poop is fertilizer, and then we'll close it off when the raspberries start to grow. Chickens are great for so many different things, and eggs and egg yolks especially have nutrients in them that are hard to find anywhere else. I mean, for instance, choline, which is an important building block when you're growing a baby or postpartum, or just for anybody, you can find that in bone broth, but you can also get that in the highest dose in egg yolks. And so thinking about how cheap and good protein and fat that an egg is, it's like, I'd never want to not have chickens again. That's like the most important. If we can get a dairy cow someday, I will be very excited. If we do our own beef again, that would be very exciting. If we do our own hogs again, that will be great. But chickens are a necessity for any homestead, or even any small, family home that can manage them.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, dude, the egg shortage. Whoa. That is some crazy stuff. It's like, that is superfood. It's a superfood for us, and I find that to me, this is my opinion, it's totally manufactured. I mean, it's kind of obvious when you're looking at this stuff, if you're looking into it, whatever, to the common person, they would laugh at you thinking that you think that. But like, I find that they do this, and they do it like regionally. So I don't know, like for us, there'll be signs at the store, because we don't have chickens. So I still buy eggs sometimes from the store. And so there'll be signs saying there's an egg shortage, but there's just cartons and cartons and cartons of eggs. So it's like this weird programming thing, and I can't speak. Oh, go ahead.
It's interesting because I can't ever tell what their goal is with the PSYOP, but I know it's PSYOP,
Yeah.
I know we're being lied to, but I'm not sure why. It's like they're like there's all these plants that are catching fire, and all these birds that are being culled because of perceived illnesses. And then they say there's a shortage, and there was in some of our stores, but then I was hearing from other people that there wasn't there. Either way, it's like driven the price of eggs up by quite a bit, and it is affecting people. And you have to, just like you said with that steak, how that cow is treated and how it's fed has a big effect on how it tastes. And the taste all is indicating the nutrition in it. I mean, that's what our taste buds are geared toward. In real food, it can taste like the more nutrient dense things. And so the eggs that I grow taste completely different than eggs from the store. They look different. They are different, and I don't need to be a scientist or look with a microscope to know the nutritional value is different. So even if there wasn't an egg shortage, there's the way that the laying hens in that industry, industrial farming, is not treated in a way that I want it to be. And so growing my own is a big help. And then if you look further past that and you think of this agenda of cellular agriculture, where they're wanting to take a cell from an egg and then grow eggs in a laboratory setting outside of a chicken, grow milk in a laboratory in a like robotic cow, grow big blobs hanging of meat that are just these cells reproducing, feeding it GMO corn and soy to make it grow. That stuff's scary, like futuristic stuff. People will laugh at you when you talk about that, but you can go to any of their websites of these startups and see their big funding from like big, huge companies, and that they're really doing this. So we have to know more, like now than ever, like where our food comes from. If you're not growing those chickens, hopefully you know a neighbor or someone close by that has enough to spare that you can be supporting them, trading with them, or buying from them. It's weird times that we're living in.
Yeah, no, it really is. And the whole thing too, it's like there's also a movement to get people to stop eating meat.
Yeah.
There's like this whole thing of like, okay, we have Beyond Meat and it's literally right next to ground beef in the grocery store.
Yeah.
It's just like the whole thing is just like so bizarre to me. And that's been kind of an agenda that's been rolling out over the last handful of years.
Mhm.
And so that to me is very interesting as well. And so when the egg shortage kind of came, and then obviously during 2020, there were all sorts of stories of, farmers having to kill off a bunch of cows or pigs or
Pigs, yeah.
whatever. Yeah, they went through this whole thing. And I just think, yeah, they're wanting people to be like afraid of meat or whatever. And it's not to dock, anyone who doesn't eat meat or chooses to be a vegetarian or vegan, it's all whatever you want. But, to fall into these traps is like, it's a slippery slope, because once they
Yeah.
start taking away stuff like this, they just take away more and more and
Yeah,
more.
and if they take away what we could like what you can actually see and that you could understand as food that you could grow in your own home, like just a garden or not soy and corn processed into some kind of a patty to be called an impossible burger. None of us can do that in our own home. We couldn't produce enough soy or corn to sustain our diets for the year, So it's interesting to me because I think about the vegetarian agenda, which if you are vegetarian or vegan, great. I hope you nourish yourself by preparing things properly and caring where your food comes from and eating real food, because I think you can live a healthy lifestyle if you are getting it from real food sources. But if your diet mostly consists of soybean oil, then that's not good for anybody. So I think sometimes that these vegetarian type propaganda, this push, is to lead into this cellular agriculture, because it's this meeting in the middle. You can still have real meat, but you just won't have to kill a cow for it anymore. We will grow it in a lab, and then that solves the problem. And it's scary because the milk, one of these things, which I'm spacing on the name of it right now, but they have gotten the GRAS rating, which means generally recognized as safe. It's what the USDA will say that a food can be sold. So we have to keep our eye out for this new kind of milk that's grown in a lab that might be coming to shelves somewhere near you. And I'm sure it'll be in the form of some kind of delicious ice cream.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And the USDA, that's such a racket too, because even like the farm that we've sourced our beef from, she was talking about, it's kind of like the whole organic stuff, how like you have to be certified organic, you have to have these licensings, you have to, all this stuff that costs tons of money to just be certified, and then but there's like plenty of companies that grow organic, but they just can't put it on their label
Oh
because
yeah, because you can't afford it. Yeah.
yeah, and they haven't chosen to go down the route of going through all the paperwork and signing things and everything else, but just like actually how inhumane some of the practices that the USDA enforces and what they actually pass. Just like the
Mhm.
FDA or all these acronyms for all these controls that we have. You come to find out, or the whole kosher rabbit hole, which is like a whole show in and of itself. Whoa, it's like crazy. But yeah, all these things that have been put in place to make people feel safe, when actually it's like really not safe at all, and not not put in place for the favor of people in general, or their
No.
health.
No, it's all about them taking more money and more control and making it so it's harder for us to just have access to things and to trade and sell to each other. I can't say that my eggs are organic. I couldn't. You can't have that name anymore. You can't. You can say naturally raised, and then next thing you know, they're putting some kind of a patent on that where you have to have some kind of paperwork filled out to be able to call your food natural. So I mean, it's confusing for people. I know some growers around here will use the term beyond organic, because you can't say your food's organic. It's better than that, because even when things are called organic, there are certain things that they can spray it with that are still acceptable. There's also the case that there could be a farm that's 5 inches away from the border of their farm that's spraying, growing Monsanto stuff and spraying glyphosate. So once you get the certification, there's no one coming and watching. So if you're buying from a big grower, you just can't know. But if you're buying from somebody you've met and you've been to their farm, you've seen that their cows are happy and they don't look sick. You've seen that the place is clean enough, that as a farm shouldn't be really that clean, but it, it should be, not a garbage dump, that chickens aren't in cages where they can't turn around. I mean, even like free range, when they talk about eggs or chicken, the rules to that are really like they have to have like a 2 foot space. It's not necessarily what you picture when you think of free ranging chickens, or what I call free ranging, which is my chickens, they get the door to their coop open and they go where they want to until it starts to get dark and they put themselves away and we close the door for them. That's free range. That's different than what the USDA calls free range, when you want to put that on your package of eggs so that you can sell them for $13 a dozen instead of 7 or whatever it is now in the store.
Yeah, it's a racket, and it's so crazy because for me, I'm a person that picks up on energy really well, specifically from items or something. And
Mhm.
I literally will feel, I mean, you can feel the energy on these things. At least for my personal experience, holding like a carton of eggs that we would get from the same farmer we get our beef, versus a carton of eggs that are organic and free range and all the names. You can feel the difference, and you can also, as we were talking about, see it when you're cooking it, feel it when you're eating it, whatever. But I've sometimes been in the grocery store and can feel things, and I'll put them back just on the feeling I get,
Yeah.
just from holding something. And even little things like that, people don't think about. They don't have that sense about them. They're so disconnected or so numbed down with all the other things that are bombarding them with life, that they are unable to even like pick up on these small cues that are really important to listen to. And I just see, what you're doing, with your children. They're going to be able to pick up on these cues because they've been exposed to it. And it's so
Yeah.
cool to just be able to, think about people raising their children in that way, so that they'll have a better sense about themselves and what to choose and what not to choose, and, all these sorts of things.
Absolutely.
And, I wanted to ask you about the chickens and how, so, because my first thought is always about the harvest, when you think about these things. And so with your kids, particularly your 9-year-old, because he's probably old enough, obviously, to, maybe perhaps create relationships with them. How do you explain stuff like that to a kid?
So it's always part of conversation since he was little. So even before we lived at this homestead, we lived next door to my parents, and my dad and we went on caring for cattle once, and then we had hogs another time. So when he was really little, he was around these cows, and we always talked about how this is food, this is beef, that's where a hamburger comes from. When we would sit down to eat, we would talk about steak or beef, that means cows, and pork or sausage, that means pigs, and chicken, oh wait, that is chicken, that's an easy one. So we would have that conversation, and that was easy for me too, because I mentioned my upbringing with my mom, but my dad was really kind of a wilderness guy, and we would go hunt grouse or deer or elk or moose, and it was important for him to instill in us that when we went fishing, that something gives its life to nourish you. And so my dad is a complicated character, but that part of him is really deep, and I appreciate that part of my childhood, of like being able to really recognize that. So it was inherent in me to be able to just pass that into my kids, so they knew that's part of the cycle of life. But how better to honor the thing and to make your food taste more delicious is to take really good care of that thing while it is alive. It benefits everything, benefits the environment, the animals, and yourself. So with our chickens, we don't treat them as pets. We definitely treat them as livestock, but we enjoy watching them. We'll do things like put an apple on a stick and then stake that into the ground so we can watch them peck at it, and kind of sit there like we're watching TV on a summer afternoon. And it's fun. We have fun with them. But we're maybe a little closer to our laying hens when we know we're going to have them for a long time, whereas meat birds are in a chicken tractor and they're moved every day, and it's less playing with the chicks and just kind of letting them do their own thing, but always with the knowing what the purpose is, so that it's never a surprise, and understanding that that's that cycle of life, that something has to die to give life to something else. That's just the cycle of life, whether it's plants or insects or when you're farming anything. There's no kill diet. That just doesn't exist. And I think it's important for kids to know that, and they do. And my 9-year-old hasn't really wanted to be involved in the processing of it. He kind of goes back and forth saying he's going to, and then there's something that comes up at the time where I think a lot of it is just that he knows that what we're distracted and he can go play video games at his grandma's house or something. So, we don't force anything, because how more traumatizing would it be to be forced to watch your parents kill chickens? So he can do whatever he wants on those days. And I know eventually he's going to want to help us, and he's going to be, work through the feelings of feeling scared or nervous, and probably come out the other side feeling really proud of himself. But he definitely knows that chicken that we cook and put on the table tastes a lot better than any chicken he'd had before.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. That's so cool to hear, because that's one of the things I do think about is what would be the best way to, teach your children that this is what it is. And I love that. I love that you would, take them to the cow and say, this is where hamburger comes from. It's just like that. That's so natural. Instead, there's adults out there that don't know where certain foods come from, and it's okay. It's no judgment, but it's just like, wow, to think the disconnection of that is just, whoa, it kind of boggles the mind a little bit, at least for me, because I can't imagine not knowing these things. So
Right.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear that's how you're guiding them towards it. And so one question that came through on the chat was from Polymathing, and he asked about, do you have any experience fermenting mushrooms?
I have not done mushrooms yet. And I've also seen some recipes for canning mushrooms that I thought would be cool. But most of my family has textural issues with mushrooms, so we only eat them certain ways. So I've been hesitant doing that, but I've heard cool things about fermented or pickled mushrooms, and I like marinated mushrooms. So I'm assuming that they would be really good. I would just have to know what kind to get into that would maintain a really good texture during that. But I haven't done it before.
Yeah, I've never done it either, and I imagine they could be good, but I imagine too it's like, yeah, the sliminess. I wonder how it would go, or what would happen. But I also think of mushrooms as they have, a lot of times they have dirt on them when you even buy, if you buy mushrooms at the store, they a lot of times have dirt. So to me, it feels like they would be like a natural pair for fermentation or something.
Yeah, and I'd love to forage my own to do that, I think, if I was going to, so I knew where it was coming from. We are in the Northwest, you have a lot of varieties of mushrooms to choose from growing everywhere. When I was a kid, we used to forage morels every year, my dad and I, and then, there's chanterelles and oyster mushrooms and turkey tail and everything growing around here. Liberty caps and cyanescens as well, cubensis. But no, fermenting it would be really cool. I'd love to try that sometime.
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, very cool, man. This has been a super, super great. I feel like I want you to be able to plug again your memberships, and if there's anything else you wanted to get across for people about, any advice you would have for somebody who maybe wants to get started on this type of journey of being more self-sufficient with their food, taking more control of it. If you had any advice for people, maybe just share that for a second, and then
Sure.
kind of give yourself a little opportunity to replug your memberships, because that's really cool. And I would love to actually come and see you, or take a class with you and learn more, because whoa, you are a wealth of information, and I just want to say kudos, and I appreciate you, and I just really love what you're doing, and it's really excellent, and I've really had a good time talking with you.
Yeah, me too. And I think we're close enough that I'm just a road trip away. Are you near Portland or more south?
Well, we're in the Gorge, so we're in Washington.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, we're in
Okay.
Washington. Do you know where Carson, Washington is in the gorge by
No,
chance?
no, but I'm sure I would when I saw it on a map. I've been through there.
Yeah, we're not far from like Hood River.
Okay.
We're on the other side, obviously, we're in Washington. But yeah, if you're near Bellingham, it's a road trip away for sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent. Yeah, we should totally get together this summer.
Yeah,
I
that'd be
would love
awesome.
that. And I could see us doing some kind of a maybe a workshop together because there's so much I want to learn about herbs, and what you share is really fascinating to me. I have a friend here locally that is a wildcrafter, and she forages nettles on my property, and I just follow her around that time of year and ask all the questions I can fit into the short time that she's here. And she does workshops here locally. She's doing an herbal bone broth workshop this weekend at
Ooh.
herb shop in town that I'm going to try to get to, because I know the bone broth thing down and out, but I don't add anything special. So doing medicinal bone broth sounds like a really good idea in the
Oh,
wintertime.
you would take
Um,
that to the next level, lady. You would love it. Yeah.
yeah,
There's
for
so
sure.
many options. That's cool.
Yeah. So for advice, I don't give advice much, but I would say if you think what we're talking about is cool, which you should because it is cool, you should definitely think about, like, I didn't just do this in a day. Like, everything I've done here is incremental. I started where I was at and I learned one thing at a time as it was interesting to me. Just like when we were talking about homeschooling, it was not done by force. This was not me forcing myself to learn this new lifestyle. This was me learning something and being passionate about it, being excited about it, and having fun learning this new thing, making it a hobby. So if you're somebody who's had Taco Bell 4 times this week, but you wish you could cook more for yourself, then maybe you should just learn how to just cook a meal. And maybe it doesn't have, maybe it's that semi homemade stuff we were talking about at first, and it's just one step at a time back from that. So maybe like I always use tacos as an example, right? You get taco shells, but you get ground beef and you cook it, so you're learning that skill. Get shredded cheese, but next time maybe you're not getting the bag of lettuce and the bag of shredded cheese, you're getting a brick of cheese and you're grating it yourself. That sounds like it's kind of dumb if you've been cooking for your whole life, but it's not. Everybody had to start somewhere, and if you didn't grow up around someone cooking, and you didn't grow up around someone growing their own food or any of that, then it's kind of foreign to you. And if you have the means and you have a freezer, just look around your area, look on Craigslist, look online, and see if you can find a local farmer that has beef. Even if it's not 100% grass fed, what you get from your local farmer is going to be better than what you can get in the store, and it's going to be cheaper. It's going to save you money. You just have to put that money up all up front and then make sure you use the food that's in your freezer. So I would really recommend trying to support someone local, because then you're making these connections that if there is a shortage or there is some kind of a breakdown in the supply chain, you have that local person that you've already developed a relationship with. So buy eggs locally, try to get milk locally if you can, whatever it is that you enjoy eating. Those are the things I would recommend. And if you want to learn more and you think the way I speak resonates with you, and you think we would connect well, that's what Greener Postures is all about. It's making connections and learning from each other, meeting people where they are and learning together. So the workshop for sourdough, if you're interested, is again the 26th of March, and that is at 3 p.m. Pacific and live on Zoom. To sign up, just go to greenerpostures.com/workshops. All the workshops that I do are available for replay only, which means if you don't want to attend live, if you're shy, or if you don't like that type of engagement and you'd rather just watch it, you just sign up and say that you want replay only. So any of the workshops I've done in the past, and that would be fermentation for food preservation, fermented beverages, fermented condiments, nourishing bone broth, and canning. All of those are available for you to replay only. And then over the summer, I do plan on doing a fermentation workshop again and doing another fermented beverages workshop, both in June and July. So if you go to my website, you can sign up for updates, and I'll make sure to send that out in an email when there's more information, or follow me on Instagram so you can see when I have more live workshops coming up.
Awesome. Wow. This was incredible. Thank you so much again for coming on. And I had such a good time talking, and the chat people have been loving it. I'm still balancing, looking at chat but trying to be very focused. So I do sometimes get a chance to glance over, but yeah, people are really digging it. And I think you're definitely bringing a lot of knowledge and wisdom for people to start stewing and thinking about. So yeah, this has been great.
Cool. Yeah, this is awesome. I've met so many cool people online, and I was really closed off to this idea, and until 2021 about, and I'm so happy that I did kind of dive into this realm, because I've met people online that I now know and are friends in real life, and people that are my online friends that I feel close to, and it's cool. So if you're sitting there watching, and you're usually watching, and you want to engage, just find somebody who you feel like you like. All of us are normal people on these podcasts and stuff that you hear, and just send me a DM or an email, and we'll engage. If you want to get started on this journey of learning more to do more for yourself and relying less on systems that you don't agree with, then let's talk.
Yeah, I agree with you, sister. And I was in the same boat, and I was almost like I was very resistant to technology for a long time, and it wasn't until really stepping into that and being okay with it that I realized too the same thing, where it's like, oh my goodness, like it is something that when you have balance with it, it can be so fulfilling, and meeting all these people and being able to connect with people that you would never be able to in any other circumstance,
Totally.
and so it's like just the double-edged sword, it can harm you, but it can really help you, but it's
Yeah.
all about balance, and I think that that's the most important thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. That's what I try and keep in mind too, like when there's people that I love so dearly and have learned so much from, and you can kind of start to look up to them and like put them on a pedestal, and then
Mhm.
you do have to remember that they're still normal just like you. Like they
Yeah.
have the same types of things. They have their own life going on and all these things, and it's like really good to just try and keep a level head and like look at people
Totally.
at eye level instead of, oh, we're in
Yeah.
a culture where people want a messiah, someone to come in and save you. And when you're in that mentality, you usually are there's a rude awakening at some point when you realize that you have to do it yourself, and you
Yeah.
have to be able to have the ability and the gusto to just get in and get your hands dirty. So thank you for the work you do, and thank you for coming on. And
Absolutely.
I will let you go. And for anyone who wants to stick around, I've got some updates for you. But until then, good night, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks so much. We'll talk soon.
Yep. Bye bye. All righty, folks. Well, that was so lovely. What a great conversation. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. I've scheduled this talk months ago, or maybe a month ago, and I've just been really looking forward to talking with Lanni. Um, and I have to work on her name. Saying it, I don't know why it's so tricky for me, but she did say that lots of people kind of get tripped up on it. But anyway, check her out. All the links for her work are down in the description below, and you can sign up for her membership. I know she also has a Patreon too, and she kind of talked about all that stuff. But with all of that said, I've got some slides as usual for you all if you want to get some updates on my end. So, next week's show on the Healing Home, it will be Mario and I, and we're going to be talking about cat medicine and cat lore. Something very near and dear to both of us. We both have deep relationships with cats in our own way. Specifically, the cat we have right now, Carl, and we both have been interested in just the history of cats, why they are feared and revered. Also, I have a lot of knowledge when it comes to cat medicine and herbal and natural care for cats in general, because with our cat, he's got a few more chronic ailments that I've worked with over the years using herbs and raw food and different things to help him be as healthy as he can at the age he's at. He's 17, and he's doing very well for his age and his condition. And I feel as though a lot of it has to do with the fact that we have treated him with herbs and many natural things over the years, and have avoided a lot of the allopathic kind of like not so good foods and stuff. So Mario and I are going to get down on that subject next week on the 14th at 4 p.m. And we will be having another episode of Last Thursday. And that'll be this week on the 9th, again at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And yeah, so we're just going to go for it again. We had a really good time last week doing Last Thursday, and we're looking forward to continuing on with this series. Again, patreon.com. If you want to support me in any other way, you can go to patreon.com/the healing home. And Nomad is asking, good question. Do you have a Telegram group for the Healing Home? I do, my friend. And it is just Michelle's Healing Home on Telegram. And I think it's down in the description. You can get the link to that. Patreons get early access to my full moon offering as well. So I announced that 1 or 2 days before the actual official release. So then patrons will have an opportunity to purchase the remedies before all the other subscribers. And today is the full moon in Libra, and I released my Strong and Serene tincture. I am very, very happy with this tincture. I have been working a lot with all 3 of the remedies that are in there, which are usnea, elderberry, and reishi mushroom. This is a really great combination of forest remedies that are very potent and really wonderful and very gentle, all for the immune system. They all have their own elements that they bring, and that's why I called it Strong and Serene, because I think that it's just really wonderful for strengthening the immune system, for keeping it healthy, keeping things flowing. It's really wonderful for helping to move like stagnation in the body, wonderful for revitalizing and repairing maybe organ tissues that have been stressed or impacted by, say, chronic coughing, or just maybe years of just maybe abuse. I don't even like using that word, but basically the reishi in there, because it is an adaptogen, it really helps to balance things out. So if there's been something that has been spiked or low on energy, reishi can come in and kind of balance that out, right? And it can also just bring a sense of calm to us. And the usnea is such a wonderful immune boosting, immune supportive lichen, but it's also really wonderful for the lungs, as is elderberry. So all in all, the 3 together just really pack a really powerful yet gentle punch. And so it's safe enough where it's something that you can be taking even on a daily basis. And I always recommend, if you're going to take something for maybe a week or 2, maybe like cycle on and off, but this is a very safe remedy. You could even give this to a child. You could even give it to an animal if you needed to at a very low dose. There's some blackberry raw honey in there too, so it's got a little bit of sweetness. It's just really nice. I've been taking it throughout the day today. I've been working with it for a handful of days and just really, really enjoying it. Especially great for this time of year too, because now is the time where people start to think about, we're going to do a spring detox, we're going to do a fast, all these things. So, it'll be a good remedy to have around if you're trying to cycle that kind of thing into your regimen. So up on the screen is my menu if you're interested. Strong and Serene tincture I talked about. It's a 1 ounce, 22. All the elements of this tincture, all the herbs. So the elderberry, the reishi, and the usnea, I've harvested myself, wildcrafted them. And so there's a lot of love in this tincture. And I just wanted to say that too. There's the energy of our mountain that we live on and our property. And so there's just a lot of really great stuff going on in that tincture, and I'm really happy about it. So that's available. Horseradish fire cider is still on the table from last month, along with all the other remedies that you can see on the screen if you're watching. And again, as always, michelleshealinghome@gmail.com. michelleshealinghome.com for any other inquiries. You can schedule a consultation with me there. You can find out more about the remedies that I'm offering. You can also read my blog, which I try and be quite up to date with. So there's lots of recipes there and things like that. Sign up for the newsletter there. And I also shared a recipe in this month's newsletter on actually how to make a usnea double extraction. And so that's what's really important about some of these lichens and mushrooms. They because they have water soluble and alcohol soluble properties, it's really important to if you're making it or purchasing it to make it as a double extraction, or make sure that you see on the label that it's a double extraction, because then you're getting the most potent form of that lichen or the mushroom or whatever berry or root that they're working with. And so I run through the whole process on how to do that in this issue of the newsletter. Even if you're not signed up, you can still read the newsletter by going to my website. So you can also text me if you like, 503-568-1569. Also, last but not least, Mario is having a presentation on Pisces. He's going to focus on the esoteric side of Pisces this week. That's going to be on Friday. I don't think that he has picked the time just yet, but he usually starts maybe somewhere between like 4 and 6 is usually where he might, get started or whatever. But anyway, this is going to be a really good one. I just love this image too, the Pisces inside of the toroid. It just really illustrates the energy of this sign and all the things that are going along with it and how deep it is and how much there is to explore. And so I'm really excited for him to get into the more esoteric side of the subject. And it's a place where he's very comfortable too. So that'll be really exciting. And yeah, so I think with that concludes the episode. I'll just cruise the chat. False reality check legs. You're asking, no more soap, all sold out. Yep. I am scheduled to make some this week or early next week. I just restocked up on a bunch of oils that I need for the soap. So within the next, I bet, month or so, maybe month and a half, I'll have more soap. But yeah, it's great. I'm so glad you like it because I do too. And it's one of the things that I will never, I mean, I will if I have to buy soap, not opposed to buying really nice, healthy soap, but making soap has been seriously so rewarding. And there's so many options, but it's a good one. So yeah, glad you guys are liking the soap. I love it too. It's one of my favorite things to actually make. There's like a really serious magical alchemy that happens when you're making cold process soap with lye, and it's really fun. So, well, I think I will say goodnight to everybody and say thank you again for joining us. I had a really great time with Lanni, and wow, what a wonderful woman doing wonderful work. So make sure you check her out and go support her. Take some classes if you're wanting to learn more. She has a ton of information on her website too, where you can just look at her blog and see what she's up to. But follow her on Instagram. That's where she seems to be most active. And I really enjoy seeing what she's making and creating. So again, big shout out to her and big thanks. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Again, it was another lovely Tuesday, and I will check in. Look, we have these stink bugs. You see that thing on the cord? Oh my God, he's been wanting to like hang out with me this whole stream, and I've been knocking him off, but oh my God, he's right there. So big thank you to you guys, and much love. I'll see you guys all soon.